So this is Danny Pershonic with Blizzplanet. I'm here with Cory Stockton, doing an interview for Legion. How you doing, Cory?
I'm great.
Having fun so far?
I am. It's
Yeah?
a good day. It's a very good day.
Yeah, it always is. Pretty excited about the cinematic. That was probably the biggest surprise for WoW today.
Yeah, for sure.
Was that always the plan after you guys announced Legion at Gamescom to try to do something big like that here? Or
For sure. I mean, to be honest, we didn't know if the cinematic was totally going to be done and ready to go. It just turned out that the timing worked out really well, that the cinematic would be ready to go. And there's no better place than here to do it.
Totally.
So, no, I think that worked out really well. That, and then being able to drop a lot of the extra info in the panel of the details, right? Because at Gamescom, there's the Demon Hunter and artifacts and stuff, but I think here we were finally able to get into the meat of the actual details.
Yeah, that was awesome. Talk a little bit more about the cinematic. How did that come to be? How did the decision? I mean, that's probably one of the more story-driven cinematics that you guys have done, where it feels like it's going to be the jumping in point to the game. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think number one, it sets you up for the concept of the invasion, right? The invasion's so dire that there's really nothing that the Alliance and Horde could do but work together to be able to deal with it.
Right.
I think it harkens back a little bit to Burning Crusade, when we both had to go through the Dark Portal, have our bases, like, they're kind of close to each other.
Yeah.
You know, but they're obviously separate, but it's like we came through the portal and there's an Alliance base and a Horde base. And we're working together against a common enemy. So I think we wanted to set up that. We also wanted to set up some of the core characters. Like, clearly Sylvanas, I think, has gotten a huge reaction from everyone of her, kind of helming the ship for the Horde. She will play a huge role, throughout the expansion. Varian's always a character that we've wanted to go deeper into, a character we get a lot of questions about from fans. His connection to Anduin, I think, is obviously pretty clear there.
Definitely.
And just his desire of how the Alliance isn't the kind of place, like, I think a lot of people have this perception, like, the Horde's hardcore, the Alliance isn't.
Right.
I think part of this also is to show, like, Varian how he really feels about what's going on, right? Like, he's not going to give up. He wants to fight as hard as he can. So I think there were a lot of kind of heavy themes.
Yeah,
I would say. Like,
it shows Varian in more of a little bit gritty way.
Exactly. He's got the big scar.
Without his armor when he's in the water.
Yep.
How did you guys decide to use Sylvanas as the character for this? Is this because of her ties to, being undead the way she is, or
no, not at all. I think she's just a super popular character that we love, that the fan base loves, and it was just a matter of finding the right place to use her, and make sure that she fits into the right situation.
Right.
I wouldn't say Sylvanas is the most trustworthy of characters, as we've seen historically. Things that she's done with the Forsaken aren't exactly the kind of things like you would do with someone you're allied with, right? So I think there's that kind of aura of what decision might she make next.
Right.
So I think she's a very exciting character to work with, because you're not really sure what she's going to do, right? But we sure know that she's very popular. So we love getting a chance to use her and really put her in the spotlight.
Yeah, that was definitely a cool moment when all of a sudden you key in on her and she's shooting the arrow over. I mean, it's just like chills and whatnot. That was awesome.
Or that she's going to backstab him at the end of the cinematic, like, sorry, Varian.
Well, that's the thing. Like, you just don't know. Like, Sylvanas, she's a little shifty. You're not really sure what she's going to do.
This is Ben. He works with me too. Thanks for coming last minute. So I've just kind of talked about the cinematic. So if there's anything you'd like to ask, please feel free to jump in at any point.
Maybe not about the cinematic, but maybe later.
Go ahead and ask.
It's about the artifact and the class accessories that was introduced, I guess, last year. So I saw on the official website that now every artifact has been presented. That, for instance, for Holy Paladin, there is also an hammer, but also a libra. So it's like it's finally time to introduce class accessories with the artifacts for most of the class.
Yeah, the Libram is actually one of the first new kind of things we've seen like that, and that's a new technology that we've been working on for years, to be able to have accessories that go on a character but don't necessarily go in a character slot. So that Libram you're seeing is the very first concept of that. I think we're talking about it's the Marksman Hunter, one of those. We're talking about maybe doing a quiver to go with the artifact that would show up, and you know, and where they make sense. So like a totem, maybe for shamans, like stuff like that. Definitely something we wanted to do. We did a blog on it for the fans, like you said, like almost a year ago. So we have technology to support that. It's just a matter of using it in the right place where it makes the most sense. So artifacts are supposed to be the most epic weapon you've ever had. So it feels like that's a great place to start for that. But I think that that's a system that can grow over time. You know, obviously it's used sparingly right now, just on a few key pieces. But I think the goal for us and the team is that over time that can become a reward mechanism where you can get something that can go on your character. You know, that can be a sign of vanity. It can be a sign of like, oh, I did this achievement or I did whatever. But we're starting it with artifacts, and then we'll continue to grow it with time.
Talk a little bit about how you guys came to the new. I don't know what the system is called. It's not Daily Quest, but it's more like the World Quest. The World Quest, yeah.
World Quest.
How did that come about?
We actually just that name. We've been going back for that. We agreed on World Quest, so
I like it.
Okay, so. The core concept of that kind of comes from missions. So if you think about what we did with missions in 6.0 in the Garrison, you had this list of things you could do. They would expire over a period of time. So if you could see the reward, you could decide to do it. If you didn't do it, it would expire, and then we would refresh it with new missions, right?
Right.
In 6.2, we moved to the shipyard concept, which was missions, but we kind of used a map, right? So they were in different places on the map. So the concept here is to basically have that kind of gameplay, but to allow the player to actually do that mission, right? You're not sending dudes to do it, you're doing it yourself. So you can think of it as like a quest, right? Bonus objectives from 6.0, from Warlords of Draenor was a concept that we had there. These are kind of a mix between a quest and a bonus objective. So you log in for the day, and then you go to your class hall. In your class hall, you'll be able to look and see all the world quests that are available across the world, right? And some of them will say they're up for 3 days, some will say they're up for 2 hours, but that one that's up for 2 hours might drop them out. And it, you know, you're like, oh man, I want to do that one like right away, right? So when you get in, every day we refresh them and they come in and they go. And that's kind of the core concept there, is that you can come in and there's always something fresh and new to do, but we're linking them to the concept of faction. Okay. So when you log into your class hall every day, you also have an emissary will show up. And so there's a faction for all 5 of the main zones, right? So High Mountain is Tauren. So you could have a Tauren there, and he's like, I need you to do 5 things in High Mountain today. If you choose to do that, then you'll contribute to kind of like a sub-quest, a little cover quest. If you finish all 5, you'll get a big faction hit, like 2,000 faction. Cool. If you just went to High Mountain and did whatever you wanted, you totally can do that. But each one will probably pay out maybe like 50 faction, so you might end up getting like 200 or 300. Versus doing the emissary quest.
Gotcha.
The key to the emissary quest not feeling like daily quests is that, like Hearthstone's daily quests, they stack up. So they can stack up for about 3 days is what we're thinking. That could be less, that could be more. Right now we kind of like 3 days. So if you show up and you see the Tauren there, and you didn't log into WoW that day, he would still be there the next day, and there'll be another emissary there too. If you don't log into WoW for, say, 3 days, and then you log in, you would see all 3 emissaries there. You could choose to do all of them, choose to do one, choose to do none. It's like your call, right?
Yeah.
But the idea is that I think with dailies, sometimes people feel like it's a little bit of a job.
Right.
Like I have to, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss out. The idea here is that we're always randomizing the field, so whenever you log in, it's going to feel like something fresh. But the emissary route gives you that long-term progression. So it's not like every day I'm just doing some random thing in a zone. You know, the idea of the emissary is like you're actually earning faction that's going to get you really, really, really good rewards. So you can choose that you want to focus on High Mountain, or you want to just focus on, you know, doing things wherever you want. But really the goal there is we create player choice, create a really strong in-game progression, and we're also able to really explain the stories of the people that live in the individual zones.
Right. Are the quests going to keep you in the Broken Isles, or are they going to...
No, they'll keep you there.
Okay.
Yeah, and they'll be, like an emissary will have 2 options. One option would be to do all of his or her quests like in a single zone. Like you just want to do Suramar that day. So you can choose to do all the Suramar stuff. Their other option that they could offer is that it would be a quest for High Mountain Tauren, but it's across all 5 zones.
Oh, okay.
So like if you don't want to focus on one zone that day, they'll be like, oh, well we have High Mountain Tauren in Suramar and in Azuna, you know, and in Stormheim, and go do one thing in each one. So really what we're trying to do here is create variety and choice throughout the whole thing. And all of those missions vary from day to day. So even though you might get the same mission in the same place, we vary the objectives.
Okay.
So, one day it might be kill a boss, loot 8 things, and kill 7 things. The next day it might be kill 2 bosses and loot 5 things. And that's it. So even if you get it in the same POI, the same town,
it won't be repetitive.
That's the idea. So each one we're trying to create at the minimum 3 variants, but in many cases we've created 5, just because once you've already built the content for us on the WoW side, varying the objective isn't very hard.
Right.
So I think that can give us a little bit of. I'm not going to tell you it's completely new.
Right.
But for a player, it can definitely vary your gameplay when you show up and you have to kill a boss versus running around and looting something off the ground. Those are very different gameplay experiences, and so I think with a little bit of variation, we can create a lot more content.
That's cool.
And that's really the key, I think, about Legion, is that we're trying to take those lessons from even Warlords of Draenor, from Pandaria. Pandaria had the daily quest in-game with all the factions, which I think had a long tail, but for many players it felt a little grindy. Whereas in Warlords, we had the bonus objective concept, but a lot of people burned through that really quick. And then they were waiting. And so I think we're trying to look at both of those and create something interesting, but also something that can last months and months and months. Because, people are going to get to in-game.
They do, yeah.
Quick.
People level quick.
And it's at that point, that's really the game. That's really the game for them, right? So you can't tell them, well, wait for patch X. They need content right now.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that's what we're trying to solve with that.
Okay. Another question is maybe with the leveling system.
Yeah.
Because one of my friends asked me, how will it work when I have a friend that is leveling
the scaling levels
in an area, into an area, but want me in another, and when we go, let's say, in the second area together, in the same second area together, but we are not the same level. Because
we scale the content, we don't scale the player. Mm-hmm. Right, that's what you mean. So you're with a guy that's 110 and you might be 104.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So essentially we're going to scale to the highest level character.
Okay.
Because otherwise the content would be pretty they just cut through it like butter.
Right.
There wouldn't be any sort of challenge. So we'll scale to the higher level character, but internally that character that's 104 will be able to hit that character even though you normally wouldn't, right? Because 3 levels higher, your hit kind of goes. So we would allow that person to still do damage, but they would get experience and rewards that are appropriate for their 104 level.
Okay.
Right, but they can still experience the content with you.
Are you guys concerned about the fact that now that you're not necessarily having a clear path of how you're leveling, what that's going to do for the story progression? Because it felt like in Warlords the story progression was pretty good. I don't want to say linear, but you kind of followed a path, right?
It was linear. There was obviously options to do, but if you were looking at it at the grand scale, you definitely did the zones in an order.
Right.
That's how WoW's kind of been, right?
Yep.
We all asked that on the team, actually, when we made the decision to do the scaling zones. Because that's not something we necessarily started with.
Okay.
A goal that we've always thought about. How do we do sidekicking? How do we let you play with other players? How do we give you choice? I think a lot of us always looked back at Northrend and said, what would Northrend have been like if you could choose to go to Dragonblight first, or if you could have choose to go to Storm Peaks, or even Ice Crown. So many people had already hit max level, so they never even made it to Ice Crown. Ice Crown is one of our best zones we've ever made, but so many people hit max level in Storm Peaks
and never went there,
and they didn't get to go. So I think it's something that's been in our minds for a long time, but technology wise it's very tough.
Okay.
Because you have to make sure the tuning still feels right. It's very easy to break the game dramatically.
Definitely.
You have the friend concept, like you guys just brought up. How do I play with my friend? Then you also have the story element. So the key that we did for Legion is that every zone has a completely self-contained story that relates just to that zone. There is an overarching story, obviously, which is Legion and the invasion that's happening at the Tomb of Sargeras. But when you go to Val Shara, the story is about the World Tree being corrupted by the Fel. And that's what you're trying to figure out. That's, the World Tree, it's corrupted, it's in a bad state. You need to go into the nightmare. You got to figure it out. You're doing all kinds of druid stuff. It's a very contained story. It's all there. When you go to High Mountain, you're dealing with High Mountain Tauren. There's 3 tribes of High Mountain Tauren. They're fighting an ancient enemy that lives inside the mountain. You got to reunite the tribes, and then it's a story. It's contained. Stormheim. You have Rykul. You get to find out what the Rykul's culture is all about. You get to go to Valhalla, like all their stuff. You get to find out a little bit more about the Cavaldir that we know from Northrend, see Rykul. So each one of those zones, I feel like, has its own super detailed, really great story. So whatever order you pick to do it in, you're going to experience that zone story.
Okay.
But obviously, the invasion is affecting every zone.
Right.
So you'll get that unified, but we did have to make sure that was a different thing.
They do have, each region do have a similar goal with getting the pillar of...
Yes, the Pillars of Creation.
Yes.
Yes. We do have that, and that I would say fits into the concept of the Legion invasion affecting the Broken Isles as a whole, right? You have an overarching goal in each one to kind of complete that, and it's like your choice. Here's 5. Which one do you want to do first? And that was something we didn't talk about at Gamescom. We already had that working. It was internal, and it was something we decided like that feels like a BlizzCon thing.
Yeah,
there's going to be
definitely
a ton of questions. We're not doing a panel, and it also I think it's exciting.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
anyone that's played WoW all 10 years, I feel like that's a pretty crazy change.
It's a big shift.
It's going to change nearly the way to play.
Yeah.
Like,
and a lot of people are going to come back. I think as we saw with Warlords of Draenor, we had a ton of people return to the game. And I think our job is to keep those people playing the game, right? And I think we're going to have a lot of people come back for Legion because they want to play a Demon Hunter. Or just the concept of the Burning Legion is very exciting, I think, to WoW fans. Yeah. And so when they come back, people could be all different levels, and we want them to be able to play together and also to have a different experience. Like, you might go to Suramar, and you might go to High Mountain, and that should be okay. Like, that should be an okay thing to do, and hopefully you guys can compare and contrast your stories, and that's interesting in different ways. Like, you would do a different dungeon, you did a different POI, like, I think that adds to the core of the game.
Yeah.
Like, when we're all talking about Hellfire Peninsula and we're all killing boars and and doing our thing, like there's some unity around that, but I think sometimes it can be more exciting if a lot of us have different stories.
I think it'll add to the exploration factor too, that we haven't maybe had in the same vein as quite a while, and so now you can just, where do you want to go? Maybe you've already heard about this one, but you want to explore and uninhibited.
Well, yeah, I think Nagrand is one of my favorite zones ever, right, from Burning Crusade, and I remember loving Nagrand and not being able to go because Nagrand is a late zone, right? You're in Terracar Forest and you're like, oh, I mean, this is cool, but like I really want to go to Nagrand.
Right.
I think a lot of us on the team felt like that. Like, if you could have maybe gone to do what you wanted right away and you get engrossed in the game, that can make a big difference. WoW doesn't take very long to get in or get out. Right. So I think when you get into WoW, the more that you feel like you're making your own decisions, the more you feel like the character is yours, and the more you really like the game.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the War of the Ancients trilogy, so I'm like,
I love that storyline. It's so awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool to start seeing the bits that are taking shape from that.
There's so much in Suramar.
Yeah, that's exactly.
So
I can't wait to see Suramar and how
history, and I mean, we created whole new races,
right?
With the Nightfallen and the Nightborn. Awesome. I mean, I really think that there's a lot of depth.
Also,
there.
during the panel, you tease a little about the party at one of the noble mention. It's one of the new dungeon for Suramar.
Oh, yes.
Is it going to be something like Dragon Age Inquisition when you go to a party and you try to go?
You'll have to play the dungeon. There's a bunch of secrets that are about that dungeon, but that dungeon actually takes place in an outdoor area in the zone, so you'll be able to play through the area that dungeon is in the outside as well,
cool.
Which is pretty cool. It's something we haven't done a lot of, but when we can do it, we love it.
Yeah.
Because it makes the world feel more real.
Definitely.
Than going through a portal.
In regards to, so Demon Hunters are going to be available if you pre-order.
Yes.
Do you guys have an idea of how much in advance of the game launching that you want them to be available, or is that still in the works for...
That's probably still in the works. I mean, I'll tell you what our goal is. Our goal is that as soon as we feel like what we have is ready and it's good and it's playable, I mean, we would let people play it.
Right.
It's really just a matter of us feeling like it's ready.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly the goal is to give you that, obviously you're going to buy the game. You're probably going to make a Demon Hunter, give people that taste, give them a chance to play it. The people that are they're going to put up for the game. We feel like that's a great reward.
How do you plan on handling, and maybe you don't know this yet, but the people that want to buy the physical collector's edition that pre-order a physical collector's edition, how getting a Demon Hunter early, is that something you guys are going to try to figure out, or
that's something we've heard before too? Before we had the digital deluxe edition, we had a lot of questions like that for people that wanted to get like the pets, but we didn't have digital deluxe because the pets were only in like the box.
Right.
I think Burning Crusade was like that, and maybe even Northrend. It's a question we have to figure out.
Okay.
It's a really good question.
I know this is a little bit different, but like for StarCraft, what they did for StarCraft and Heroes, for Artanis, they just asked for proof, and I realized that anybody could fake proof. So I mean, just an idea.
I think for a while, it comes to the scale.
Yeah, understood. Because there's probably a lot more people playing that and pre-ordering StarCraft. Yeah. I totally get it. So I was actually happy that they had that. So hopefully you guys can figure out a solution.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out something.
Yeah. I think we're almost out of time. You got any more questions?
Not me.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Cory. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's fun talking about the game.